It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's not about them. But it's all about Him. But it's all about Him. It's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's not about them. But it's all about Him. But it's all about Him. We want to elevate our praise. May our praise. And lift you up. Lift you up. We want to give you what is due. Lord, we give all to you. We want to elevate our praise. May our praise. And lift you up. Lift you up. We want to give you what is due. Lord, we give all to you. Oh Lord, we magnify you, and we lift you higher. It's not about me, Lord, but it's all about Him. Oh Lord, we magnify you, and we lift you higher. It's not about me, Lord, but it's all about Him.
Good morning and welcome to Your Pathway Home. It's Matthew Allen with Jason Schofield and Kody Pritt.
Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Your Pathway Home.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's always good to be able to start the Sunday morning with you guys and with you folks here who are joining us today. So
Happy Mother's Day to all those mothers that may be joining us.
that's right.
Yeah. It's amazing to think that we're back to this holiday again. It's a blessing to have our moms live with us. We took them out for lunch yesterday, and just good to spend some time with them. We're very blessed to have them live with us.
Okay, so side note on this topic, we were wondering, Tay and I got into this discussion with Dan. So are we parents now? Although the baby's not technically birthed. I was talking about that.
Of course you are.
And he was
Yeah,
like,
of course,
no,
yeah.
you're a
Do you,
parent now.
do you have a child? Do you have a child?
All right,
Yes,
all right. So
So
Tay's
did
a
you,
mother.
Did you get
I didn't do
Taze?
anything for her, so I'm gonna have to do something today. So.
Yeah.
We're going to have to discuss that one off the air for sure. Hey, take a moment and like and share this, please, because, we were off the air last week. We apologize for that, but we had a lot of technical difficulties beyond our control. When we finally, it got into the time, we said, okay, we just got to call it. But all those loyal people who were trying to sign in and never found us, we apologize. But please share it this morning so people know that we are back.
Well, yeah, we're back, and I just we love our provider, the provider that does all this and gives us all these very many channels to broadcast. But we've had some issues the last month or two with YouTube, where we can't.
Is it YouTube or Facebook?
Last week was Facebook,
Okay.
but it's been YouTube ongoing for a number of weeks now, maybe going into months. And so, John Key, who works with he's our live stream deacon, and he does a great job. John gets up early every Sunday morning and does his thing remotely to make sure we're on YouTube. He has to do it manually. So I come in early, I get it all set up and ready to go, and then he does his thing from his house, and we're off and running. And so to make sure that those that are watching on YouTube get the broadcast as well. So we have a whole team of people here. Jason's kids are here. They're over in the big building working this morning, and so there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes here at Cornerstone to make sure that this broadcast and our Bible classes and worship services are all made available to you out there. So we appreciate that. And I got a note from Skip out in Phoenix this morning watching, and he said he really needed this broadcast today. And Skip, we want to be an encouragement to you. Just thank you for getting up so early out there and watching us today. It means a lot to us. And for all of you who have joined in, notice already people from around the country, just appreciate that. Viewers from Florida and here at Ohio and Kentucky, and just you name it. So we just appreciate that so much. It means a lot to the three of us.
So, as we begin today, we're gonna kind of a week behind, but we've been doing a theme each month this year, and this is Major Change May. That's what we're doing today, or this month is Major Change May. And, you think about how much of being a Christian is making major changes in our life. And so we're going to take various accounts that are recorded in the scripture, and we're going to see the major changes that these individuals took in their lives. And we want to turn that around and make personal application and say, what did it take for that to happen? And, we all need to make changes in our life. If you think about every year, a lot of us will focus on New Year's resolutions, and what is that about? Well, we know there's certain things in life that we need to commit to, we need to make changes, and our spiritual life is no exception. This should be a constant process. In fact, if you think about it, growth itself is change. And so when we make growth, when we make changes, we need to ask ourselves, what is it? Because we want to go from unholy to holy. We want to move from evil to good. We want to become more spiritual, more like Jesus. And that's what it's all about. And so we need to make the change. And what is it going to take to make changes?
Jason, going along with that, as you talk about how growth is change and we need to be committed to making those changes. I think also inherent in change is getting used to being uncomfortable, because when you start making those changes, it is not going to feel right. It's going to feel different. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be setbacks. There may be some, depending on what the change is, maybe some pain involved and difficulty involved. And so we need to, and I think one of the things that holds us back so often is the fact that we enjoy being comfortable. And if you are comfortable in a situation, there's probably not a lot of change happening, and you need to challenge yourself and say, I'm going to move out of this. I've got to grow to the point to where I'm okay with being uncomfortable, because I see the potential and the outcome down the road that's going to be worthwhile.
I think another part of that too is the fact that I think we are kind of blind to some of our faults, or can't see ourselves 100% accurately. It requires others around us, and then maybe a reference point. And that's what Jesus, I think, provides to us as well. So Jesus can kind of provide us a reference point for us to measure against, to see how we're doing on whether that be a spiritual front or a relationship front, whatever have you there. So I think that's part of it too. I know I'm not perfect, but sometimes I don't know where I'm not perfect. It takes other people to tell me what that is. And it takes a humble heart and a humble spirit in order to accept those things too, like you were saying, Matt. It can be uncomfortable to be faced with your own weaknesses, your own faults. You got to be able to just take that in stride and then try to work on those.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. And so you've got to be comfortable in your own skin, and take when you look at your weaknesses and you look at where you need to make the changes, take the browbeating of yourself out of the picture. And a lot of people get hung up on that. They beat themselves up. They succumb to personal guilt and whatever else, and forget the fact that you are human, and everybody else is human, and nobody else is perfect, and nobody else has arrived, just like you haven't arrived. And so if we start looking introspectively, we're going to find all these areas that we need to be conscious of and working from to try to make those changes. And I want to throw this out too. As we talk about these things this morning, and Jason came up with some really, really good application points. We're going to talk first here in a moment or two about the story of Zachaeus, but then spend the most of the time on the personal application. But the biggest thing that we've got to do here is remember that we are never alone as we make those changes. The Spirit of God lives in you. He dwells within you, and He is helping you day by day in that transformation process. And the biggest thing that we need to do is learn how to surrender to his work and his effort. As Paul would say in Ephesians chapter 4, do not grieve the Spirit. Don't quench the Spirit, we're told in another place. So surrender and allow him to do his work, and he will bear that fruit. And that's the promise.
Yeah, and you know, Matt, and it's just taking control of your own life as well, though. You know, even though we are surrendering to Jesus, you know, we need to take some self-control. And we live in a society that enjoys saying, I'm going to do it my way. Well, you can, but don't wait until somebody else starts to say, you know, you're going to make some change, or change is forced upon you. You know, you take Kody's situation right now. They're about to have a baby. He's going to change. There's going to be some changes going on in that house, and he's going to have change forced on him. But, you know, hopefully he's making 9 months of transition. You know, he's not going to wait for the baby to come home and then say, I think we'll prepare a baby room, you know, or we'll go buy some clothes now for this, and we'll start practicing what it's like not to sleep at night. You know, I don't know. Hopefully you're making those changes, you know, Kody, but
yeah, no, we are.
But spiritually, you know, don't wait for you to hit bottom. That's what I'm saying. You know, make these changes and do it. So let's dig into it a little bit. You know, I think everybody's familiar with this story. You want to start it out talking about Zachaeus, Matt?
Yeah, you know, and I think the one thing I want to really stress here before we go much further in this is the fact that there is so much more here. The story's in Luke 19, the first 10 verses. So if you have your New Testaments handy, you might turn over there and kind of go through that with us. I'm just going to kind of summarize it here, but the thing I really want to start off with is this is so much more than just a kid's story. Now, a lot of us are familiar with this story. If you grew up going to Bible class like I did, there was a little song that went with this. Zachaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. I will refrain from singing it for you, but I'm sure you remember that song growing up. And I remember this. I remember back in the 80s, we're talking about this in Bible class, and there's so much more here than just that. And I think sometimes we just kind of relegate this story to that. Jesus here in Luke 19 is in the latter stages of his ministry. He has come through Jericho. He's actually on his way to Jerusalem. That's what verse 1 is talking about here. And it says he's passing through. And in the city was a tax collector named Zachaeus, who really wanted to try to see Jesus. And there's a lot of crowd there, as always. Wherever Jesus went, there were people just everywhere around him, trying to get in and see him. As you would imagine, any popular person that is of societal notoriety and those types of things, it was hard to get in to see Jesus. And Zachaeus had a really difficult situation because he's a short man. And so he figures out, if I get ahead of the crowd and I climb up in this tree, I'll get above the crowd and be able to see Jesus from that perspective. And so that's exactly what he did. And Jesus, being the Son of God, knows what's going on. And as Jesus passes by, he turns to Zachaeus and says, hurry up and come down, because today it's necessary for me to stay at your house. Now, I want you just to think about this for a second. Jesus is on a mission. He's on his way to Jerusalem, but he's going to stop for a little bit here and take the time to go personally invest in a lost soul. And not just any person. This is a tax collector. This is a person regarded as the lowest of the low, the worst of the worst, the greatest of sinners by society standards. Jesus says, I'm going to come and I'm going to stay at your house. No respectable religious teacher would have ever done that. But not Jesus. Jesus is ready to go. And so Zachaeus gets down and welcomes him into his home with joy. And you notice here, starting in verse 8, you see some repentance that Zachaeus demonstrates. He says, I give half my possessions to the poor. If I've extorted anything from anyone, I'll pay back 4 times as much. So he demonstrates repentance. And notice what Jesus says in verse 9. Today salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. And look at verse 10. We'll come back to this toward the end of the broadcast today. The Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. So Jesus personally gets involved in the life of this man and changes it forever. And it's all because of a man that was willing to take the necessary steps to put himself in a position to be seen by Christ so that the changes could be made.
Well, Matt, I mean, I think it all starts right there in verse 9 where Jesus said, today salvation is coming to your house. Because you have to, so what Jesus is recognizing there is that Zachaeus has made a change. He's made a major change. And so it starts, all spiritual major changes start this way. It is welcoming Jesus into your house.
Yeah.
It is this desire and this commitment to changing your thinking from this physical world to a spiritual world, realizing that it is so much more. You look right at the beginning of this in verse 2, and notice it says that he was a chief tax collector and that he was rich. Why is that such an important thing? Is because his entire life was focused around physical things. But the moment that we welcome Jesus into our house is us making a commitment that there's so much more than what we have here on earth.
I think that as we grow older, we also develop an affinity for the spiritual more and more. I can remember back in my 20s being concerned about brands and things that I had to have to look good, and I had to have a certain type of house, and I had to have a certain type of vehicle, and the clothes I wore had to be have a certain look and brand, and a lot of that has passed me by now. Not that I try to dress out of style or drive a junker or anything, but it's less important to me now. The older I get, and so what happens is I think we begin to develop an affinity for the spiritual, but we've got to make that choice as soon as we can in life, because the sooner we can learn the lesson that the things here in this life don't really matter in the long run, and the spiritual is what matters, the better we're going to be.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the kind of like the formula or the pattern of what happened in this interaction. And I think you pointed it out beautifully, Matt, that Jesus is coming in and there's already a knowing about him. He's got some popularity. He has some sort of buzz around his name and who he is. So Zachaeus, this guy, is intrigued by this. But it's not enough for that. So Jesus initiates the interaction with Zachaeus. So if we as Christians are to try to, I guess we can look at two perspectives. We can look at how we as evangelists can be like Jesus, or we can also look at how we can accept change in spiritual maturity as Zachaeus did with open hearts and humbleness. So, but going back to how Jesus initiates the interaction, Zachaeus is humble and willing to receive him in the interaction, and then he is receptive to what is preached to him when Jesus goes to his house, and then he does make that change. And you guys had pointed that out beautifully as well. So he ends up giving away some of his possessions, or half of it all, and then he said if he didn't repent and change, then he'll do it fourfold or whatever. I think that's kind of the formula of how this always plays out. So if we as evangelists go to other people, we initiate the interaction, because people aren't necessarily going to be seeking for Jesus unless something dire has already happened to them. So we need to kind of be initiates out there. But then also, if they don't receive with humble hearts, there's that other verse that I think, was it Paul or Peter, or is it? I think it is Jesus. He tells them, go into their house, and if they don't receive you, just dust off your sandals and then move on.
Yeah, that's back in Matthew 10, I think.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they had to do there. And so, I realize this covers 19 verses. And this is a short story, if you would, or an account. But I also want to make sure that we don't underemphasize how big of a change this is.
Yeah.
And when you make changes in your life, it is challenging, it is difficult, and for every one of us, it's going to be something different. So one of the second things that I would like to point out when it comes to this story, or we would like to discuss, is the fact that there will always be personal obstacles in the way. And it's more than just him overcoming the physical and changing his thought process to more of spiritual things. But did you notice, I mean, it points out here in the scripture, verse 3, it points out that there was a big crowd. So there was a big crowd. Some people might say, hey, I went to see Trump, and, I never got close to him because it was a big crowd, because he was an important person. Well, or Biden. But then...
we got to play both sides here.
Whoever it was.
But in this case, Jesus
they were on
was
their
in
cars,
town.
3 people. But
That's right. So Jesus is in town. And so he wants to see Jesus. He could have said, well, I tried. I went and nobody spoke to me, or whatever it might be. But there was a crowd. And what else does it say in verse 3? And he was small in stature. Now, it makes a great and a cute little kid song, but why would Jesus put that in there? Why would God share that about him? Because it was a personal obstacle here. Okay, so
Yes,
Zachaeus had to overcome some personal obstacles and challenges in his own life in order to make change. And now, I can't define what those obstacles are going to be for you. None of us can. And maybe they'll never be known to anybody else. But I just want to say, if we are going to make a major change, then you're going to have to understand there are going to be obstacles in the way.
it made me think of a story my dad used to tell. So Dad was baptized in California, Sunnyvale, California, back in the 60s. And in 1968, his parents and all my aunts and uncles moved back to Arkansas. Unfortunately, after they moved back to Arkansas, everybody fell out of church. All my aunts and uncles were baptized out in California, and my grandparents were faithful out there. But when they got back, they stepped out of church for a number of years. And so fast forward to the mid to late 70s, Dad is engaged to my mom, and he knows he needs to get back in church and get his life right. And this is in the days before Google. So he knew there was a Church of Christ up in Little Rock. And so he got up early one Sunday morning, and he was trying to find the old Arch Street Church in Little Rock, and started driving around. And he'd left in time, and he's trying to get up there. Drives around through these neighborhoods south of downtown there, and can't find the building. And suddenly, it's the Bible time for Bible class has passed, and he just keeps driving, can't find it, and finally, we're getting up close to worship time, and he's a little bit late, and he says, "I'm going to go one more street, and if I don't find it in this one street, I'm done." And he turns a corner, and there's a church building. And really the rest is history for him and my mom and my family, because Dad overcame that simple obstacle that day of just keeping on, searching and looking, and he was accepted by the congregation there, brought back in, restored, and my mom was later baptized. But there were obstacles, and those are simple things in a lot of way, but it just resolving. Okay, when we think about our services, Cornerstone has been blessed the last 3 years with an amazing amount of guests from the community that literally walk through the door and sit down in our pews. It's at a flow that unlike anything I've ever seen in my preaching career, and many of my colleagues marvel at the visitor flow we have here. But I want you for a moment to put yourself in the shoes of a guest that may have been outside of church, outside of God for quite some time, maybe never even gone to church, and the amount of courage it takes not only just to find the building, and today it's pretty easy because all you got to do is put it in your phone, but to sit there in the car. I've heard of people sitting in the car and hardly ever getting out of the car because they are scared to walk through the door.
Well, Matt, I think the reality of what you're saying is true. You don't know what to expect when you go to a new place. And, I mean, we're coming out of, I hate to keep bringing this up because since this pandemic is officially over, praise the Lord. But I just want to say that coming out of COVID is a very real thing. I mean, there are people with social anxieties related to that, getting back into a crowd of people, you know, and seeing is it comfortable, you know, to wear a mask. That's a very real thing. You know, do we want to get in there where people are going to try to hug me or shake my hand? And I kind of joke about this, but this is true. You know, if you've never been to a church before, you don't know if they're going to start swinging out snakes or, you know, or whatever else. And it's intimidating, you know. We try to do a bulletin, and I've noticed in some people's bulletin, you know, they actually have kind of like an order how everything is going to be. Have you ever been sitting in a church you've never been before? You're like, when are they going to do this? I wonder when they're going to do that. And it's kind of helpful to adjust to that little change. I mean, there's personal obstacles, whether that be anxiety, but imagine, you know, using something like that, facing God someday and say, well, Lord, I wanted to serve you, but I was just nervous. I mean, dude, I mean, he got nailed to a cross. You don't think that caused a little anxiety? It said he had sweat drops as blood. He was praying to God that I wish this could just go away right now. You know, if you could make this pass. But it's overcoming it, and he did it for the greater good.
Yeah, we kind of went off. My mind's off of the snake twirling, but I wanted to kind of bring it back to the original point that Jason was making here about Zachaeus' stature, how he was small. I think there's a bit of a representation here. Matt had pointed out earlier on when we were going through the story that Zachaeus was a tax collector. I think that's a representation of his spiritual position, his sinfulness. I think that the inclusion of Zachaeus' stature is a representation of his physical position. Maybe that could be an insecurity that he has that Jason was talking about. There are things that we're going to have to work through. I think, but the point here is that Jesus comes and initiates interaction with people despite their sinful position, despite their physical positions, and so despite what we have come with, what it is that's wrong with us or that we perceive as wrong with us. Jesus does not care. He is the nullifier of all of those things, to either the spiritual and the physical, to the point of, I think you had a good point here, that at the end of time, Jesus judges us all by one standard. All by one standard. Nothing else matters. The only thing that matters is whether or not we have received the message from Jesus and accepted it and moved on and then, you know, expanded it or not. And we have a couple of really good, I want to get to the comments too.
Let me just throw this in, Kody, and I'll give it back to you. I want to say this to anybody that's watching. You and all your baggage are welcome here at Cornerstone.
Exactly.
And we'll help you.
That's the point here.
And listen, and we'll help you bring it in the door because we're going to help you give it to Jesus. And Jesus says, come unto me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. We're experiencing that rest, and we want you to experience that rest. And that is the whole message of Cornerstone. That's what we do as a church family. And I think it's one of the reasons why so many people have been attracted to coming to us, because they feel that when they walk in the door.
Yeah. And there's no snakes.
Exactly.
Greg Morrison writes this, and I think this kind of couples into this well. It says, we must change and submit to the authority of Christ. In Matthew chapter 12, verses 41, it says, the men of Nineveh who stand up with this generation at the judgment and will condemn it because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, something greater than Jonah is here. I think coupled with this is the comment before that, Ben Hastings, he says, contentment is great, but complacency is destructive. And I think we can apply that to our spiritual life. So we could, if we're content with the things that we have and the blessings that we've been given, that's a good thing. But if we're complacent where we are in the position that we are, then that is destructive in our spiritual journey. And I think I would liken it to like maybe an analogy. Contentment is gratefulness or thankfulness, where complacency is idleness or maybe stubbornness and movement. We don't feel like we need to improve at all. So anyway.
Yeah, a lot of good scriptures and stuff being shared here. I hope you take a moment and look at those things. And I appreciate what you've said there, Kody. I mean, you ought to consider being a preacher.
Oh, well, thank you.
I appreciate it. And I think, what, we've already kind of alluded to this, but one of the final things I want to say when it comes to Zachaeus and making major changes is, do you see how he was willing to do anything? Christians often get criticized because they say that's a little extreme. I mean, you won't do this, you won't celebrate that, you dress like this, you speak like this. It's extreme, and I don't want to be part of that. I was thinking about Zachaeus. I mean, this guy climbed a tree. Okay, I can't. First of all, I don't climb trees anymore. But I was thinking, I can't think of the last time that something was so important to me that I was willing to climb a tree to make sure I got a good visual on it. Well, maybe deer hunting.
There you go.
That's pretty important, I guess.
But but think of what he did. Here he is in a crowd. He didn't care what anybody else thought about it.
Exactly.
And he climbed a tree to see Jesus. And you think about the rich young ruler. He asked, I've done all these things, Jesus, what else could I do? And he told him, well, give up all that you have and give to the poor. And the rich young ruler went away sorrowful. Why? Because he wasn't willing to do anything that it took to make the change for Jesus. And the Zachaeus, though, what happened to him after Jesus came? He invited Jesus in his house. Well, we see him giving half of his goods, verse 8, to the poor, and on and on and on. So he was willing to do anything. He was willing to give up the things that were most important to him at one time. He was willing to climb a tree just to make that connection. And so we need to ask ourselves, what are you willing to do to make a change? There might be something in your life you need to give up. Jesus now becomes the priority. That's where change starts.
It might involve giving up. It might involve embracing something. If we look at it from the positive too, it is just the type of heart that says, "Here I am, Lord. Use me. Use me. I want to be your vessel. I want to be someone that can make an impact for change." And here's the thing. I think as we look down at verse 9 and 10, this is what this is all about. All right, salvation. The Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost, and today we are His agents. We are the ones that spread this news. And so the thing that I think is important is it's very easy for us to downplay the culture right now and just talk about how bad it is. And it is bad. There's plenty of evidence of that. But we need to be careful as we do that, not to alienate ourselves from the people who have real needs. And the biggest thing I think right now that is going on is the fact that there are more and more people that have real legitimate needs. And the fact of the matter is our mission is to share with them the way of Christ. Not to fight against them, not to put them down, not to build up walls, but to present them with real, genuine, spiritual solutions that will help them. That's our mission. That's what we've been called to. And it's not just your preachers and elders. It's not just certain gifted ones in the church that do this work. We all have been called to this work to help point the way to salvation.
Yeah, it's an acknowledgement of the problem or the obstacle, as Jason was putting it, and then a plan or an action plan of how to solve or resolve that. It's not over stigmatizing or over labeling what the problem is, and then I don't know what you would call ostracizing it and just writing that off. We have to accept that stuff happens, and that's the reality of a fallen world, and then we have to be able to move forward. And I think Jim wrote about this, saying that Jesus doesn't focus on where we have been or where we are particularly right now. He's focusing on our hearts and where we're moving towards.
Yep.
And that's
even more what
thing,
Jim. Yeah. Well, I love what Jim says. I think I ought to post this on my own little feed, but where Satan builds chasms, Jesus builds bridges. And I love that. And it is our desire to reflect Jesus and to help people through those chasms of life. and so that we can all make the change. And change is not easy, but we don't have to do that alone. Jesus in our life will help us to do that. God is our protector. In the battle which we face, we don't do it alone. He arms us with the sword of faith, and we can do this, and we have each other to do this, and that is a big purpose of the church, and so that we can keep each other encouraged by that. Matt, you want to finish us up today?
Well, I think the biggest thing here as we talk about making major changes in May is what things we pulled out of this is, one, have the courage to do it, follow through, overcome the obstacles that may be in front of you, that's going to be worth it in the end if you just keep pressing on. And then the other message I want us to pull out of this is on the other side, for those of us who are in the church, members of a congregation, we've got to do our job as people come to us having indicated they want to make those changes and get their life right. We've got to be behind them, pointing the way, encouraging them, helping them, just building them up, and seeing the good that's being made. Don't just look at somebody and see all the rough edges. See the potential, see the bridges that can be built to help them come to Christ. And that's our responsibility. We are ambassadors for the Lord, and we've got to fulfill that mission.
All right.
Yeah, well, and verse 10 ends by saying that the Son of Man came to seek and to save that which is lost. And that's just exactly what you just said, Matt, which is that is our mission.
That is our mission. And our mission, we come together this morning as a church, and it is to worship and glorify God today. But our mission as we leave, look, church is not just about what happens inside the four walls of the building. In fact, it's far more than that. It is verse 10 in action. We have the message, and we live in the world. We're not of the world, but we live in the world. And the message is to manifest the life of Christ through our own major changes that we've made, demonstrating that He is in our life, and that He is real, and that He is powerful, and that He will sustain us as we go through life. We can make that proclamation each and every day. That's where the work's done. Mm-hmm. Work's not done in the building on what you do on Sunday. The work is done out in the world in the week.
Yep.
Well, thanks for joining us. And next week, the thief on the cross.
Yep.
So we're going to talk about that during Major Change May. We appreciate each week when you join us. And we thank you for all of those who have commented. And sorry if we missed any of your comments, but we hope that you have been encouraged and edified. Meet with the brethren near you. And if you're ever in Dayton, Ohio, we hope you join us here in Centerville at 5051 Wilmington Pike. Until then, have a great Lord's Day. Happy Mother's Day to all of those mothers that are out there. And if you're in our area, join us at 9:30 a.m. God bless.
We do. Do you feel the shadows deepen? We do. But do you know that all the dark won't stop the light from getting through? We do. Do you wish that you could see it all made new? We do. Is anyone